Tabletop will start after the following messages.
Greetings, adventurers. I'm Max, and I compose background music and themes for tabletop games. Whether you're delving into Dungeons & Dragons, unraveling mysteries in Call of Cthulhu, or battling in Warhammer 40k, let my music set the perfect tone for your games. As a fellow tabletop enthusiast, I create tracks that resonate with your game's diverse realms, available on all major streaming services. Plus, I also offer custom commissions to tailor the perfect soundtrack for your unique campaigns. Ready for immersive gaming sessions across all genres? Visit Coltrane Compositions on Patreon for access to over 150 songs, including looped versions, that will make your game unforgettable. That's Coltrin Compositions.
Welcome back to Tabletop, everyone. This is Nick, and today we have an exciting interview. We have the editor and co-founder of Eerie Games, Toro, and they are currently developing a new TTRPG, Fatebound. And we're going to be talking a lot about sort of game development, where you come from in your game journey, and also sort of running horror just as a treat at the end. So, Dell, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, so I'll start off with the simple answer. Hi, my name is Dell. I go by they, them. What else can I say about myself? I'm the co-founder of Eerie Games. And I guess we can start off with a little bit about like how we came to be, how all this magic happened.
Yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about Eerie Games? So you guys have, I was kind of looking through your website and kind of looking at past games, past stuff you've developed, and it's kind of a broad-ranging set of stuff. You have LARPs, you have TTRPGs, you have a bunch of different system stuff in there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Eerie Games, how it came to be, and what you guys kind of focus on?
All right, so let's start off with just how Eerie Games came to be. Scott and I have known each other now for 2 years. It was very serendipitous. I had, what had we done? I went to PAX Unplugged with a friend of mine. I had not gone to actually any tabletop cons before, I guess 2 years ago now.
That was my first. I actually was at that convention, and that was my first convention as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
No, so I had gone there with my friend from college. We were just walking around. They had made friends in the New Jersey, Pennsylvania area for some time. I was basically down in Virginia alone. So, but a time came around where they started introducing me to their friends. And that's when I met Scott. We started shooting the breeze. I had known them for all of about 10 minutes. I turned to my right. My friend had abandoned me. So, and for reference, I'm 28 years old. I've been in the workforce now for 10 years. I'm out of college. I can at least claim I'm somewhat of an adult. Scott is a lovely 50-year-old man whom I had just met. We were walking around with his friend Tiffany, but we had spent about 2 hours just shooting the breeze, talking about tabletop RPGs, and just making such a wonderful connection. And so over the course of those 3 days, we played games together. We went around shopping. He encouraged me to buy so much money. I have never spent that much money at a con before. But this is the type of man who walks by a stall, doesn't buy anything himself, but says, wow, you should really buy this in front of the stall's owner.
Yeah.
So I had walked away with so much. He was so happy for me. I guess I was happy for myself because I got new games that I wanted. But then after that, Scott asked me to come with him to a birthday weekend to run tabletop games at our little house con. That repeats again in October. And then finally, a year after meeting each other, we're back at PAX Unplugged. It's the two of us and a small collective of friends. And he turns to me and he's like, hey, the game that I've been working on for this amount of time, well, it's finally getting to the point that I'm I'm gonna try and publish it. I want to get it out there. And I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. But what we were like discussing and like shooting the breeze about and figuring out was like he didn't really have anybody to like help him out or like help get some like socials out there, help like just be a secondary like eye and ear to the project. So I told him that like I didn't really have that much else going on outside of work, so I was willing to step in and like do those extra tasks. So it started off small with Para, our first game. Um, and I got my hands on the book. I got a chance to like really dig deep in, and really at that point we hadn't really gotten to Backer Kid yet. He had basically just like created the teaser page. And then it was like, okay, well, we have our friends. Let's start getting this out there. And then also like really like digging deep, like what do people care about when they're in? And for context, Para is this lovely little game. It's a perfect way to describe it. It's a wonderful game where you get to play as young adults coming into college. You are experiencing all forms of paranormal powers, and that has ostracized you. Growing up, it has led to scenarios akin to Carrie, akin to other Stephen King's novels, such as Firestarter. You've had ghosts coming up to you, and people don't understand that. But you get a chance to come to this college, Haster College, where you join a parapsychology department, where you get to be with other students who have had similar scenarios come about. And at that first house con, goodness, Scott sat me down and I got to play. And it was the most heartwarming experience ever. We all came in with creepy characters. I had come from a cult where they were using me as like the second coming, healing the sick. And finally, there were people who didn't see me as an object, who didn't see me as a as a tool for them. And it was just such a surreal experience that like I knew from that point onward that we were going to make some real magic. So
yeah. And this is, I'm just kind of butting in here because from what I saw too, the mechanic of the game it's diceless. Is that correct? Yeah, it's a completely different mechanic. So why don't you talk a little bit about that as well? Because that is something that kind of has gone through some of the other games that you guys have produced. Yeah.
Yes, and I so encourage it to go through every single game, but a lot of our friends have also been going like, we would like to roll a die, though. Can we roll a die again? I was like, fine, we can play other games, I guess. But
yeah.
The tarot system, the tarot resolution system, it's really nice. It's based off of like a 3-draw system. So placing down 3 cards, utilizing the numbered cards. So your minor arcana, which kind of look basically like your standard playing card deck. Ace to 10. And then afterwards you have like face cards. Right. And then the beauty of the major arcana, who tell a journey basically from start to finish, from the Fool all the way to the World, which is completion. Yeah. So the fun additional mechanic, which like, okay, yeah, you draw, you see if you get a success when you draw the card. The major arcana add the extra layer of saying, all right, now you get a chance to add narrative control. So if you draw a major arcana in the first or second position, you get to add in the additional details that come about from that major arcana. So strength, for instance, it's dealing not only with like brute strength, but also like strength of character, represented by a woman standing next to a lion who is not afraid. She places her hand upon the lion. So in those instances, we always fall back to like horror movie scenarios when we try to describe this. Think of our dear, is it Jodie Foster? I hope it's Jodie Foster right now in Halloween.
No, it's not. It's not. What's her name? It's the person in Knives Out.
Yeah.
Jamie Curtis. Jamie
Curtis. I was watching Freaky Friday and I have gotten my wires completely crossed now. Goodness gracious. Okay. Jamie Lee Curtis. She's sitting there goodness, the shape is outside staring in, and she's uncertain of what to do. So in such a scenario, she's like drawing for like a stealth-esque roll. Um, but when she is so certain that she is about to be caught, when Michael Myers is like creeping over the furniture, what is in the background, which is one of our draws, background action opposition, she manages to look down and find a sewing needle, something that is so akin to femininity, but then is able to be used as a weapon against her enemy. So sewing needle right to the eye, and you continue along your scene. And so it gives a very it gives a chance for players to have that additional control that we usually don't get to have in a lot of role-playing games where like, all right, we rolled the dice, now it's time for the storyteller to tell us what happens.
Absolutely. So let's go through it, because I think I want to make it super clear, because
Yep.
audio medium, all that kind of stuff. So as you said, Jamie Lee Curtis sees Michael Myers breaking through the window or whatever.
Yeah.
Is a check called by the person who's running the game, or how does that work? Or is a player says this and then the GM says, okay, then draw 3, and then you flip 3 tarot cards over and just kind of run me through how that is read?
Standardly, where it can kind of be a little bit of a mix of those two.
Mm-hmm.
And how I usually go for it is I'm describing the scenario and I always make the call like, hey, I need to know, what do you do? Do you want, like, you gonna hide? You gonna run? What's up? And it's at that point that they'll describe like, I want to give like, yeah, let's duck down, get behind the couch. Let's see if they just manage to like walk by me without really noticing that I'm there.
Yeah.
Perfect. And that is when I would call for a draw.
Great. And so then they draw 3 cards in a row.
Mm-hmm.
The first card is red, like you said, with the like if it's a numbered card, then that goes towards whether it's a success or failure. And then if it's a major arcana card, then it kind of adds flavor and narrative control to the game.
Yeah. So major arcanas give you that automatic success. And then for the minor arcana, it kind of works a little bit like D&D, where you're kind of like, all right, compare it against a score. Let's see if you make it below. And if you get below, then you get a success.
Amazing. Cool. So that's a very cool system too, just because I think that, like you said, I always love systems that use something, because a dice roll is kind of a yes/no mechanic. But if you change your mechanic to be a little bit more, not loose, because this is still yes/no with the numbers, but you're adding in variables like the art, the arcana, things that will actually make it so that the player can feel inspired by the check itself, which I think is a really cool kind of bit of the process in these games.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really nice and wonderful. And here's where we're going to dip a little bit our feet into the mysticism of it, because a lot of people do form deep attachments with their cards. We utilize these tarot decks to allow glimpses to our futures, to add a little extra, not control into our lives, but to take a moment to reflect, to look forward, to look back.
Yeah, it's interesting, because there's like a lot of people say like dice tell stories, and like a lot of people like don't plan the whole story out. Let like play to find out is a classic thing in Powered by the Apocalypse and stuff. And this is kind of fun because you're kind of partnering with the system in a fun little way. That's very, very cool. But I also kind of interrupted in the middle of your talking about the kind of coming together of Eerie. So you guys have found this really cool system that Scott has created. You are on board, and you guys release it. And then what happens from there? Do you guys just continue to decide like, this is a great partnership, I want to work together more? Like, what were the next steps?
Oh, yeah. We made the connection. We got through, or we're getting through Para right now. We're truly realizing like the longevity of what a backer campaign really is. Because we launched back in May, and we're still dealing with the step-by-step of like, all right, information comes in, information goes out, like sending out the books, charging credit cards. But it was around probably once we had launched our game, it was around April where we started to like look towards like, all right, let's try to get the next game out. In Survivor Sorority, how did Survivor Sorority truly come into play? It's a lovely game where, and frankly, it comes about because we love Final Girls.
Yeah.
We are horror movie enthusiasts. I think that's obvious by now.
Yeah, and that really comes through in the voice of the company as well. You guys, like, when you kind of look at the breadth of the work that all of you have kind of come up with, it is very much kind of, if not directly horror, then it is sort of, has the trappings of it a little bit as well.
Yes, it's so overall we try to I feel like we always try to give somewhat of a horror experience. I think Nexus Accord is probably going to be our first big step outside of that. Um, but we wanted to tell the story of the final girl, and one of the biggest things you have to ask is, the movie's over, what comes next? And I think it's something that gets, well, I guess neglected is a word to say from the movie format, because after the movie, technically the movie ends, or unfortunately, what comes next? A sequel where we have to suffer again.
Yeah.
We wanted to do something that was a little more proactive. So Survivor Sorority takes you into the role of the final girls who said, no, after our movies, we're going out and we're going to find other killers to stop them before they make more final girls. And so it's it's a condensed version of our like tarot mechanics. But it plays up what it is to be in a horror movie again.
Yeah.
You have stats based off of fatigue, fear, and health. Because by the end of the game, you're having a downward spiral where all of those are interplaying off of each other.
Yeah.
People get tired. People become more afraid. People are like holding on. And truly, it gives you the best feeling in the world when you know all the odds are stacked up against you, but you still manage to pull out a victory or still pull out a win. The game is definitely designed for like shorter termed campaigns or one shots, but by far the amount of times that I've played it and run it at conventions, it does such a wonderful job at like putting the player in a horror movie.
Yeah.
In a slasher
absolutely.
specifically.
Yeah, that's such a cool little conceit as well. But yeah, you just mentioned that you guys are working on a new game. So can you tell us a little bit about that and what it's all about? You said it's a little bit of a departure from what you got, what you all have like worked on in the past. So what is this new direction?
So we have so many that are just like bubbling in the background. He has such a wonderful brain. It continuously pumps out new stuff, and I have to go, okay, cool, we have a timeline that we're supposed to be like staying on for this game. But we'll first talk about Nexus Accord, and then I think we'll hop into our newest game, Fatebound, that's like backer kit right now.
Yeah.
So the Nexus Accord, originally designed as just design, and what immediately came out as a LARP, is about the future. Cyberpunk-esque. In the year 2100, there we go. It was about 2000 just happened. In the year 2100, society has evolved to the point in which we are now creating artificial life that looks so much like us, that behaves so much like us, that it has now become a sentient creature. And therefore, we have now synths, synthetic organisms who, after so much evolution in terms of artificial intelligence, they have developed consciousness. And that's where the LARP Nexus Accord comes in. You play as the basically United World Council, who have all come together to decide what are the rights that these synthetic organisms actually deserve. They have been produced by corporations. They technically were commodities right before this. And the biggest thing that we wanted to take away from this game, and like, it's primarily like the minority experience, because one, it's deeply tied to slavery. Synthetic organisms and although there is a strong disconnect between the African American experience or other basically like minority experiences who have undergone slavery in history, as they are real people, this is a departure from that because these are synthetic people. These are an other. But it's something that needs to be discussed. In addition to that, because we are having something where it is you are playing someone, or like you could be playing someone who looks like a human, or basically passes as a human. One of the things that we brought into the basically into the world culture was passability, which then brings into my personal topic, or something that's personal to me at least, is being trans and having that additional qualifier to yourself that sometimes is self-imposed, imposed by other people. And within the Nexus Accord, how we're writing it, and we're writing it from a lot of angles, but from the primary position of the book is, and what we've discussed is, passability is usually something that is put on to you by somebody else.
Right.
It's something that society has decided, you are close enough to being this. You are feminine. You are masculine. This is how you appear. But one of the biggest things we took away from like the thought experiment that we were going through is passability a lot of the times is bullshit, because, and as we've seen in a lot of real world content in world history, current history, in fact, is that a lot of the people will use passability to prescribe something upon you and be wrong. Please take a moment to look at our previous, the previous Olympics and the catastrophe that happened with the Turkish Olympian who had false accusations placed upon her. And part of that comes through with the LARP, because we do take time to say, here are the enemies. Here are the antagonists that come about with this World Council. So we brought in a lot of like ideas from like, all right, who are the types of capitalists, we're going to say it, capitalists who will intentionally try to antagonize, who will intentionally try to basically put down these synthetic organisms for being something less than. And one of our major campaigns that we're going to be coming up with soon is the rise of the Human Preservation League, which is something that is common throughout history of just praising white history and considering a lot of minority history to be the work of others, or always praising European history over that of like African history, especially with Egyptians, considering like, oh, there's no possibility that they could have constructed that on their own. So a lot of favoritism that comes into play with that. And the Human Preservation League represents that. They represent the alternative right, the ones who will seek to try and place themselves as the superior, who will try to put down anything that is other. Looking to be a lot of fun, looking to be a scary thing to write, but it's a story that we want to tell. And I'm trying to gather up as many like minority players. I want trans players. I want African American players, because when I put out this story, I want it to be something that is meaningful to the people who have felt it the most.
Yeah, and right after this break, I kind of want to talk about your role as an editor as well, and in that context. So we'll be back right after this.
At last, I have reached the tallest peak in all the world, where the wisest person lives. Finally, I'll get the answers I seek.
Welcome. I am the wisest person in the world. Ask me your question.
What is my purpose in life? What should I be doing to achieve pure happiness?
You must stream Game Master Monday.
Come again?
Game Master Monday, the bi-weekly podcast that plays a new one-shot in a new system in a new setting with a new cast every episode. Listening to their funny jokes and wild stories is the only path to happiness, my child.
Sick! I'm going to go home and binge the whole thing right now.
What a nice kid. Oh dear, he fell off the mountain. Now they'll never know how good Game Master Monday is.
Welcome back, everyone, to Tabletopped. We're talking to Del Toro here with Eerie Games, and we were just talking about some new stuff that's coming down the pike. But first, I kind of want to step backwards and talk a little bit about editing. We've talked a little bit about this off mic about your role as an editor, and also how identity plays into that, and how that affects work on a game. So why don't you kind of go through your experience as an editor first and say, what does that entail in a game design process, and what are your key responsibilities? What do you do, and how do you approach it? And then we'll kind of talk about how your personal identity and things like that actually come into the mix and will affect how you leave your fingerprints on the game.
I would probably have to say, and the strongest stance that I always take when it comes to editing is I have to approach it as someone who does not know the material, who does not know Eerie Games, who says, this is something that I have just picked up. I am walking around PAX Unplugged. I picked up a book. What do I feel when I look at it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, my first pass is always like, all right, let's look for the grammar mistakes. Easy, cool, get that out of the way.
Yeah, classic.
But I have to stop and look at, all right, when I'm reading this, when I'm talking about it, what exactly do I mean by it? And I've now had about 10 years of experience with gaming, and that's frightening to say, as a DM specifically, because I never get a chance to be a player, but whatever. But I look at it and I have to say, I'm a new DM. I want something that is strange and kooky, and so I literally have the para book sitting right in front of me. And just perusing through the rule sets, perusing through usually for rule sets and system ideas, I want to know okay, cool. I'm able to do XYZ with this ability. All right. So as a min-maxer, how am I going to approach this? Will I immediately look to see if I can be an overpowered character in 3 sessions? Okay, cool. As a role player, if I'm looking at this, what is my next steps when I actually take on this ability? Or if I say that I'm going to be joining this type of sorority or joining this particular group, am I going to have a meaningful experience, or if I'm going to get something different out of it? And where it's come about in Para, you truly identify yourself first most by talking about yourself in the back person type of deal. So talking about who you were beforehand and also labeling yourself with a trope. How did society see you? Were you the geek? Were you the jock? Were you cheer captain? Utilizing the high school tropes as we can to basically give yourself a way forward. And I think it's nice because anytime that I'm bringing something to a con game, it gives me an opportunity to say all right, this is the type of character that this character is. If you want to go ahead and play them, this is here are some examples from pop culture that you might be able to pull from. Cool. The character sheet itself gives the players something to work with, even right off the bat. And then when it comes to lore and setting, I have to ask myself, do I see myself here? Para immediately comes with its own campaign setting of Hastur College. This liberal arts college out in the middle of Vermont, small town, well secluded. But it is immediately described as, hey, this is something, this is a school for the goths, for the alternatives, for the scene kid, for a good majority of stuff. And as I was reading that first section of lore, I was like, yes, the 2000s, early 2000s. Yes, I remember my past.
Yeah.
And it's so wonderful because it does give you an opportunity to say at least Para, it gives you an opportunity to say, here is who I was. Here is who I wanted to be. And like, it would have been wonderful if my high school, well, let's not always say that, but like if this high school image was allowed to be as weird as they were, whereas allowed to have that experience and to say, I want to take that forward. And then also to just have the opportunity to be around other people who are like that. So it's the editing process for Para truly was a wonderful, wholesome experience where I got to just embrace the fact that this is a game about found family.
Real quick,
So,
I want to talk a little bit about that too, where you were kind of talking about it when you were mentioning the con games and the character sheets. As an editor, when you're looking at it from somebody who's just picked this up off the shelf and are opening it for the first time, how do you approach it? Like your role, I guess, in making it as accessible as possible, or do you not think about accessibility like in that way? And I guess the way I should define what I'm talking about, like the way into a game, that's usually the biggest hurdle to a TTRPG being played, is people learning the rules, feeling like they can actually interface with the product in some way. So as an editor, how do you kind of approach that part of it as well, the actual sort of interfacing between someone who's never seen this thing before and the stuff that you've written?
My best go-to with that is always like, one, it needs to be in the introduction section for one, always. Like, quick, here's what the game is about, but every game kind of has that.
Yeah.
My like big ask and something that we have been trying to emphasize is a game or like a system needs to be, even if it's a book, it needs to be a short book. It needs to be something where the rules are condensed enough. It gives you what you need to play to pick up and go without having to slog through like 200-page manuals. And so I think like Para itself, just check myself, but I believe within the first 20 pages, 25 pages, you have that introduction section, you have how to play the game, and you have the first steps of being able to create your character. The next 5 or so pages, or probably I would want to say about 10 or so pages, you can create the rest of your character right there.
Yeah.
It's nice, it's quick, and it's rules light enough that I can say, all right, I have the basic formula. I can now do whatever I want, or I can expand. I can have the creative freedom to bloom from here, with also like, if we do have a new GM coming in, the basic rules are enough to have a game that is going to be meaningful.
So you're kind of coming at it from that GM side that you were talking about, where you have, X amount of years of experience, mostly as a GM, as most of us are these days, forever GMs. But you're kind of like, how do I convince one of my friends or explain to one of my friends how to play this game and make it so that they actually play it rather than don't. And so that's where you're coming from, is like, let's get this snappy, let's keep it really concise and like efficient in its wording, and make sure that it is as accessible as quickly as possible to new folks. I totally agree with that process too. And I'm kind of interested in how that process kind of works for LARPs, which is another product line that you guys do. So like, how do you approach it in that way?
So for our parlor LARPs, which is special, we currently have one out. We're still looking, we're working on getting additional ones out. We have friends that we're trying to get them to like produce. You have good ideas and you have written this. Please, like, we can put it out for you. We can do it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to LARPs, it's a new bag because, for one, you're writing for the GM to be able to play it. And then so much of a LARP in terms of like physical material is all player handouts of being able to hand something off and give the players just enough material to work with. And because of that, from a player perspective, to be able to create a LARP, you really have to be a good like character mapper. And what I mean by character mapping is basically like a concept that I learned about first with Vampire is like, I have my players, I have my party of coterie. Okay, cool. There are 4 of us. How do I relate to this person next to me? How do I relate to the person on my right, the person across from me? Cool. With the LARP, you're dealing with like 15 people. So it's the joy of saying we need to create an experience where I, as a player, have at least 3 connections. And then in addition to that, like an entire like overarching plot line is happening. But I, as a player, also have like 3 B plots going on in the background that are going to keep me entertained. So how I approach it truly from the editing standpoint is I have to go person by person and really say like, am I going to is basically putting myself in the mindset of like 3 different players. If I pick up this particular character, am I going to have a meaningful experience each and every time? Like, usually I take the approach of I'm going to be my brain immediately goes to hostile, but it's not hostile. As a mastermind-esque character who likes to put their hands on everything, who likes the control, am I going to be able to have some form of control while within this role? The second one, because, and I have learned this, it's not something that I learned early in my career. Later in my career, I realized there are a lot of people who just like to be romantic and who like to have romance-based games. And I'm like, okay, cool. Some of that that player needs to get a chance within a LARPing experience, and you have to ask, like, will a romancing character be able to have a good time? And then from there, it's the investigator who likes to just like figure everything out within the LARP. So usually, I want to make sure that each character is able to at least satisfy 2 of them, because there's no way you're going to be able to satisfy everybody. But if each character offers a good experience for 2, that means overall that LARP can be enjoyed by at least a multitude of like players out there.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Like, basically, you're developing personas, and then you're trying to match each character, like you said, to at least 2/3 of them. And then as long as, you know, most of those characters have 2/3, then you're going to be able to make sure that everybody can find a character that they all kind of want. That makes a whole lot of sense. It also sounds absolutely infuriating.
It is. And like the additional hard part is, frankly, making sure that the story as well is sufficient, and it requires playtesting. And luckily we do like run a LARP group to like, one, just have parlor LARPs, do our little not Renaissance, our good little Bridgerton-esque plays that we have going on. But then in addition to that, like, we get a chance to like do some playtesting, see how the games run. And like, it takes a special thing of like being able to look at games ahead of time to say, is there going to be an issue with this with the main plot? Like, will the players be bought in enough to continue along with the story if they have their own side stories going on, or if they have or like, is there a gaping plot hole? And so we've had setbacks. We've had like one setback where we ran a LARP. We were playtesting it, and we realized like, oh yeah, the central character, who would basically exist as an NPC for like a side person to come in and get killed off.
Yeah.
People hate them enough that like they won't want to like find out why they died. Yeah. They'll just be like, okay, cool, they died. Let's move along with our lives. And so it's that special balance of just going like, we need to think about beginning, middle, and end. Is each character going to be captivated by the main story that entire time? With Nexus Accord, everyone has that buy-in of basically like, my financial future is tied up in this. I need to make sure that like we have a proper vote by the end and that everything goes off without a hitch. And moving into some of the new LARPs that we are crafting up, it's going to be another like careful balance of like, can we get this right so that way we're going to have a wonderful experience. And my goal basically is that everyone walks away saying, that was amazing. When's the next game?
That's amazing. That's so exciting. We're kind of coming to the end here, so I wanted to give ourselves a little bit of a treat. So you were talking off mic about, GMing a bunch. You've recently transitioned from offline GMing to online GMing and doing streaming and all that kind of stuff. And also, I want to talk about horror as a genre a little bit because we're going into that spooky month of Halloween. So I do want to talk first about the transition from GMing primarily offline to online, because I feel like that is a huge step that a lot of GMs stumble over, including me. Honestly, I really love GMing in person. I have GM'd online quite a bit, but I even like Roll20, which I will admit is not a super complex system, is just kind of hard to get your mind around sometimes. So can you talk a little bit about the process of like what drove it, and then how you actually went about it to make yourself a successful kind of online game runner?
Yes. So my like tabletop experience starts off in high school. We did not have online back then, so I was forced to be in person, hanging out with friends, lovely time. I didn't really get into the online space, even of just like running games through Discord, until probably about in college / post-college timeframe, where we are all split off to the winds. We're not able to see each other every single day, so we have to be online. And lovely thing, I left college and started to join the workforce right when COVID hit. So we could not be together. And so, one, I had to immediately adapt. And back then, I was doing a lot more of the D&Ds, transitioned into Vampire. But the thing that I quickly realized is online play, yes, Roll20, you can create maps, you can do a lot of stuff. There are so many map makers out there that you can create some wonderful experiences. A lot of the time at the end of the day, I give up on maps. I give up on truly what people want more often than not, or will just help them out, is just something throw a picture up on the page, something as a visual cue to just say like, here's what we're dealing with. But as I switched over to Twitch, we've moved a little bit away from like visual. So now we're just staring at each other's faces. And right now we are running a little bit more of just strong role-playing games that don't really require us to like have a deep dive into the physicality of it all. So let's just talk right now about like, I hopped into Twitch. Why? Well, we first did our ventures into Twitch when we were ending our para campaign. We were like blown away by like, oh wow, we did this, like it succeeded. We succeeded. We were getting in the money. It was ranked. It was like going up and up. We started putting out the stretch goals of like, yeah, we'll put out another campaign book. We'll add you into the book yourself. We'll make you a ghost. We'll make you a side character. And the final stretch goal that we really put out was like, all right, if we reach, I believe it was 7,000 back then, we're going to go ahead and do a streamed one shot. And so it really all started there. Just a simple one shot, like everyone has fun. And it was truly a frightening experience for me, just because I was like, I don't know any of these people. And I'm going to be playing with them online for the first time. So the first baby steps into that was one, like, okay, we narrowed down who the people are. Cool. I grab my 5 people, I set them into a little Discord group, and I say, I need your lines and veils now to make sure I do not cross any of them. Let's get that out of the way. And for those who don't know, lines and veils is just a safety technique to make sure that planning ahead, you do not add in any content that could be harmful or triggering for a particular player. So got that out of the way, got some quick mic checks. I had so much theater experience beforehand that I was like, I need everyone there like an hour ahead of time. We are going to sit on the call, and then I'm going to make sure everyone's mic works perfectly. And then we had one person who showed up at exactly like our start time, and I was like, I am frightened, but we have everything set up. We got this. We did this. We finish it. And then we go, all right, that was fun and amazing. And we had a good time. Our players had a good time. Our audience had a good time. Can we do it again? And so I already knew that we had this like side campaign book coming out. So I said, like, let's use that as an opportunity. Let's just show off more of our games, especially also for like our upcoming games. Let's take the opportunity to stop, put up mini campaigns, show it off to the people. So that way, like, you do have an experience or you do have a chance to check out this game as we're still teasing it. So you can make a choice of saying, like, yeah, this looks amazing. I want to do it. And right now, that's Fatebound, our campaign that's going to be going out in Horror Month on October 15th, where you get to play as a bunch of teenage witches who are going to a military academy. And it's a beautiful blend of like awkward teenager and also you may die at any moment because it's military school and we need to make sure that only the best of the best to make it to the final like 15 students who graduate out of 100. Yeah. So what does that require? It requires I had to learn very quickly. I need to be animate and smiling. It's something that I picked up, at least in my interviews, of like, you can't have resting bitch face the entire game. Look like you're having a good time, so smile. In addition to that, and like, feel like it's one of the losses that I get as a storyteller nowadays is I can't bring everyone into online gaming. Not everyone is going to be comfortable being on camera. Not everyone is going to like be as animate as they would want to be. And not everybody is like an expert player. So sometimes it does require like you to make the calls of like, who am I going to have who is not going to be like a huge disruption, who is going to make good choices and active choices, because although there is the player archetype of the wallflower who is there to just observe and have a good time, if we're going to be on stream and we're going to be on Twitch, everyone needs to be actively in it and doing.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so let's talk just very briefly about horror. So there's a huge thing that me and my co-hosts talk about all the time when it comes to horror, but on and off mic. There might be an episode coming out about it. But where it is very easy to scare a character, not as easy to scare a player. Is that even the point of horror games? Like, are we trying to do that? So like, what are your thoughts on that? How, when you run a horror game, what are your goals? What are you sitting down to do with the players, and how do you go about it?
So I will probably say you should never, as a player, be as scared as your character is.
Oh, absolutely.
That's probably a mistake. And like what I've been, we've been putting out like newsletters recently, and I've been going through like gaming tips basically. And one of the things that I keep falling back on is I am still here, even if it's horror gaming, to have fun, to have a good play experience. So a lot of that is, one, like what we talked about, the safety mechanics. I need to feel safe before I go into this game and know that I'm not going to end up like crying by the end of it. Unless it's the game experience you're looking for. Crying in a different sense, though. Crying from joy or crying from absolute terror that, oh my God, this is happening. But the thing that I always look for is I want to unsettle my players. And I mean, people who are horror gamers, usually they're experts at horror at this point. They know the tropes. They know like where the beats are going to fall at times. I will play in to that to basically say like, okay, yeah, we're going to play some of the horror tropes. We're going to have instances in where like, yeah, right now, this is probably where the music is crescendoing. we're going to play a lot with what we do know and what we don't know. Dramatic irony is by far the best thing that you can play around with, of just letting the player know that like there's someone on the other side of that door, or basically being less of a storyteller and just being the narrator in the story, of basically like taking the moment to say like, I'm going to give you only as much information as you get. So like a lot of the time where psychological horror comes about in films, super easy. It's physically displayed on the screen what the character is seeing. Yeah. For myself, usually I take the standpoint of I'm going to describe what you see, and then at any moment I might stop and say, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
Yeah.
You have like, and I feel like the best tool is having those shifts, having the moments in which you are playing the spooky narrator and then also being the friend there who's like, they're having fun.
So you're saying that it's like super helpful almost to have a point of view, the ability to have a point of view within the game as well as external to the game, because then you're able to like help, force those shifts if you need it to happen. You know what I mean? Like you said, of a perspective shift, like, what are you talking about? There's nobody there. Perspective shift that comes not only from a GM, but also it's more effective if it comes from within the game as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like one of the best experiences I had with that was during that streamed game where we had a player who was in a bathroom alone, having their own sort of like mental epiphany at the time, trying to figure things out, trying to figure out the mystery that's going on. And then I just knocked on my table to indicate someone was knocking on the door. And they asked me like, who's there? And I refused to answer. I only kept knocking on the table. Yeah. And like kept and just started to bang and just like separate myself from the storyteller and just only give you sound effects.
Yeah, I think that's a great point and a great tip for folks going into whatever Halloween one shots or whatever you're running this season. I think that there is always a place for depriving of the knowledge that the GM knows, because in doing that, you are forcing them to try to find out, which is placing them in an active position within their character, which is usually in a horror game a very uncomfortable place to be. Yes. Dell, it's been a pleasure talking to you. This has been so great. I really want to give just like the last few minutes to you to really talk about the new game, where people can find you, where people can find the studio, any channels that you want to plug. And of course, all of this will also be in the show notes. So what's going on in your life? What's happening?
So out right now, we have 2 games out on Twitch. Our Twitch channel is Eerie Games Dev. We have Echoes of the Human Experience, which is our long-term para campaign. And when I say long-term, we do want it to go to about like 30 or so sessions or 25 sessions. I'm getting into such a lovely place with my players that I'm like, let's critical role it. Like, I don't care anymore. So we're having so much fun. We're getting to play as graduate students this time around. So people who do have experience, who know what they're doing. So getting to play higher level characters is always fun. I almost killed somebody. It was great.
Very exciting.
One of those lovely experiences where like, I'm not as experienced with the system as I thought I was, because I did the ability and then I was like, oh, that's right, this is the kill ability. Cool. Yeah. I've reminded myself, we know what we're doing moving forward. Cool. And then our second game, which is a mini campaign, about like 5 sessions is our goal, is for Fatebound. We get to have our lovely 4 incoming students, and I wanted to give just a nice condensed version of what Fatebound is. Small cast of about 15 students total, 3 professors at a secluded manor house. And I bring the students in and we're having a fun time. We're getting together. And I ask the students, like, it's time to just do magic. I want to see what you can do. and all the students are having fun, immediately starting to basically undermine the other players at the table, trying to like one up each other, trying to cast spells over each other. And then I told them, go climb a tree outside. I want to see if you're able to do it. I want to see like how you do it. What do you do? Like, what's the magic that you're going to employ? And it's wonderful because Fatebound is all about competition. It is like, it's a military school. We're enforcing dark academia. And you as the player are bringing the teenager who is awkward and pimply and is still trying to like live with their body. And so it's wonderful because there's just so many tonal shifts of like, we're having this intense discussion, and then someone is just like, I'm 13. I don't know. And it's great. So we ended off that first session with our first death of an NPC as they lie bleeding onto another student, one of the players who is confused, worried, and all the blame is being placed on that student who may or may not be involved, but they need to figure out a way to get themselves clear, to work through it with other players, especially when they decided to scream out loud and alert the rest of the school to come in and find them with the dead body. So I'm super excited about that. And what else would I like to promote? Well, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram. We have our Eerie Game Dev. We're also on YouTube now and TikTok. And I'm loving it now because now at times I'm scrolling through TikTok and my own face will show up in there. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I have content. Goodness.
Yeah.
So it's just so much fun. I encourage you all to come. We also have a Discord server. We'll include that in the promo down below. Come in there, make yourself known, participate, because I will also just be throwing out random one-shots throughout the months, and I pull from our Discord and say like, hey, this is your chance. If you get into a one-shot, there's a good chance that I'm going to pull you again for a like mini series or a campaign down the road. So please, if you want to like get your first foyer into Twitch, I will gladly help you out. I love horror. I love playing with people, and I hope that we can have a wonderful time together.
That sounds amazing. And then also, what is you mentioned in passing, and I want to make sure that people can get their hands and be involved on it, that Fatebound is having some sort of campaign in October.
Yes.
So what are the details there? How can people get involved?
So we have a wonderful Fatebound teaser page for Backer Kit right now. We will include that in the link below. I do not know how to say that link out loud. But basically, go ahead, check it out, give us a follow, check out our Twitch page, see what Fatebound looks like, how it's run. It's also a tarot-based diceless system with the added like additions of magic as well. You get to play as young witches in Witchdom. Fatebound, intending to become a fate someday, are the higher echelon, the defenders of Witchdom, who serve the Witches' Council. And so I am so far having a lot of fun. It is a lovely mix between the kooky teen, the extremism that is military school, and also dealing with high school and all of the social hierarchies that come about with it. So I do hope you all get a chance to play it.
Awesome. Dell, thank you so much for coming on. And everybody else, next month, we are diving into our traditional October month of everything horror. We're talking Fae. We're talking one-shot building. We're talking about a system review that involves bears, honey, and maybe a little murder. There's a lot of stuff coming up very soon, so stick around, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of Tabletopped. Goodbye.